So just like last time, I needed some spare parts to fix up the engine. So yesterday I went to the spare parts store. This time I needed parts for the cylinder and the crankcase, basically everything except the gearbox and the clutch box. So let me show you what I've got. So this is an oil wire. I'm not sure of its purpose, but to take a wild guess, I'd say it's for oil circulation in the cylinder. So this is the governor and this is the timing point plate. This basically controls the ignition timing. This is a couple of washers that goes inside the timing cover. These are two bearings. These are not ball bearings, but these are roller bearings that go inside the crankcase on the crankshaft. And this is a whole set of gaskets that are applied at different parts of the engine. And now to the bigger stuff. So this is the main cylinder of the engine. This is majorly where the piston does its motion, and this comes along with the piston which is inside it. So some of the fins from my old cylinder had broken, so I had to get a new one. Also, I was anyways replacing the piston. So if you are replacing your piston in an old cylinder, you will probably have to get an oversized piston because of all the heat, the cylinder bore gets increased, and so you'll have to get a bigger piston, and then to fit that piston into your old cylinder, you will have to get your cylinder bored. But if you're fitting in a new cylinder as well as new piston, then you can go with the basic measurements. And this is the cylinder head. So this comes pre-fitted with the valves and everything. You just need to fit the rocker arms and the two tappets, the inlet and the exhaust tappets. I'm not really impressed with the finish on this. Feels like the old cylinder heads are still made with the old casting techniques or something. But yeah, we'll have to do with this. So I'll be heading to the workshop next and fitting these on the engine. So let's go.
So here we are applying grease to the roller bearings that are going to go inside the crankcase. Both the left and the right panels have one roller bearing each. So when I opened up the engine, I found out that the person who had previously worked on the engine was too lazy to fit in roller bearings and had done away with ball bearings instead. So I thought of restoring it back to the original design. Before laying down the crank in the crankcase, we oil it up really nicely so that the mating process is real smooth. And here we are applying the silicone tube on the inner edges of the casing so that we can stick the gasket on it. When you're packing the engine with a new gasket, always remember to remove the old gasket using a paper cutter or a blade or some other tool and chip it off completely. And the case slides down with minimal effort. Next, we secure the crank and the crankcase in position with the help of a few studs. Next, we get the gearbox back into picture and we slide it back with the crankcase, which is really a hassle-free process. And now coming to the timing cover, here we are trying to screw in the nut that has left-handed threads. This nut keeps the pinion in place. Now before setting the inlet and exhaust timing gear positions, one needs to make sure that the piston is in its TDC or top dead center position. Now to set the timing gear positions, you'll notice that the two timing gears and the pinion each has a marking on them. and these markings need to be matched with each other, which essentially means that the 2 points on the pinion need to be matched with the 2 points on the exhaust timing gear, and the 1 point on the exhaust timing gear needs to be matched with the 1 point on the inlet timing gear. If you look closely, you will notice that the inlet and the exhaust timing gears are identical to each other except for the markings made on them. One which has markings in 2 places is used as an exhaust timing gear, and the one which has a mark in only 1 place is used as the inlet timing gear. And here we are fitting in the governor and the timing point plate. After setting the spark timing on the timing point plate, we are done with the whole timing process of the motorcycle, and hence we seal everything back up. So here we have removed the piston from the cylinder, and we are applying a little bit of oil on its surface so that it slides back smoothly. While putting the piston back in, you need to be cautious about its position. There is a very clear mark stating the part of the piston that goes in the front. Also, the piston rings need to be positioned correctly before sliding the piston back in the cylinder. Since this was a 3-ring piston, I separated each of the 3 rings by an angle of 120 degrees. So basically, however many rings your piston might have, you just need to separate them by the maximum angle possible. Now before we can slide the cylinder back on the crankcase, we need to remove the lock pin from the piston. We have already pasted the gasket on the crankcase, and now we are applying a thin layer of silicone tube before we slide the cylinder. Now this can be a little challenging because you will have to hold the cylinder in the air while you lock the connecting rod to the piston. Once the lock pin is in place, we can slide the cylinder down. Next, we paste the copper gasket on the cylinder. The stud that I am tightening over here is different than the one present in the previous cylinder. I had to buy a new piece because the thread in this new cylinder is different than the thread in the previous cylinder. And now we can slide down the head. Inserting the tapered rods into the head. Apart from the parts that I showed in the beginning of the video, there were a few more parts that I replaced with newer ones, such as these rocker arms, because 2 of the 4 studs that these rocker arms slide on are now thicker in the new head. Also, I replaced the whole chain sprocket kit of the motorcycle because later on it would have been really difficult to reach the front sprocket again. And finally, after fitting the engine head covers and the oil pipe, we are done with the service of the engine. So let's have one last look at the engine before we say goodbye for this episode.